Chapter 1, You Are Always Choosing. Most people move through life believing the biggest decisions are the ones that shape everything. The career choice. The relationship. The city. The opportunity. The moment that looks dramatic enough to feel important. But life is rarely changed in dramatic moments. It changes quietly, invisibly, in ordinary situations that seem too small to matter. A delayed alarm. A conversation avoided. A promise broken to yourself. An hour wasted without thought. A difficult truth ignored because comfort felt easier than honesty. These moments do not announce themselves as turning points, and that is exactly why they become so powerful. Every single day, life places choices in front of you that seem harmless in the moment, but over time they become direction. People think their future is built by destiny, luck, timing, or circumstances beyond their control, but the deeper truth is far less comfortable. Your future is being built right now by the repeated decisions you make when nobody is paying attention. You are always choosing. Even when you believe you are standing still, you are choosing. Even when you delay, avoid, distract yourself, or wait for clarity, you are still choosing. Life never pauses while you hesitate. It keeps moving in the direction of your repeated behavior. There is a sentence people use when they want relief from responsibility. They say, "I had no choice." But most of the time, that sentence is not true. What they really mean is, "I did not like the cost of the better option." Because every meaningful choice in life has a price attached to it. The price is rarely money. It is discomfort. The discomfort of discipline. The discomfort of honesty. The discomfort of uncertainty. The discomfort of growth. People avoid difficult conversations because they fear conflict. They avoid starting because they fear failure. They avoid commitment because they fear responsibility. They avoid change because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. And slowly, without realizing it, avoidance becomes identity. They begin building lives based not on what they truly want, but on what feels emotionally easier in the moment. This is how years disappear. Not through catastrophe, but through unconscious repetition. One day becomes the next. Excuses become habits. Habits become patterns. Patterns become personality. And eventually people wake up confused about why life feels heavy, directionless, or disconnected, never realizing the answer was hidden inside thousands of quiet choices repeated over time. The dangerous thing about avoidance is that it rarely feels dangerous at first. It feels reasonable. It feels temporary. The mind says, "I'll start tomorrow. I'll deal with it later. Now isn't the right time." But life compounds everything you repeat. Delayed action compounds into regret. Silence compounds into distance. Distraction compounds into confusion. Weak boundaries compound into resentment. Every repeated choice strengthens something inside you. Either your discipline strengthens or your excuses do. Either your courage grows or your fear does. Either your focus deepens or your distractions take control. Nothing stays neutral when repeated long enough. The person you become is not created in one giant moment. It is created in thousands of invisible moments where you either move toward growth or move back toward comfort. This is why small decisions matter more than people think. Because small decisions are rarely small once they are repeated for years. Many people spend their lives waiting to feel motivated before they act. They believe action should feel emotionally easy before it becomes possible. But motivation is unreliable. Feelings change daily. Some mornings you feel inspired. Other mornings you feel exhausted, uncertain, distracted, or numb. If your actions depend entirely on emotions, your direction will constantly change. Real change begins when you stop asking yourself how you feel and start asking yourself what kind of person you are choosing to become. Because identity is not built by intentions. It is built by repeated behavior. You become disciplined by acting with discipline before it feels natural. You become confident by keeping promises to yourself before confidence appears. You become focused by protecting your attention before focus feels effortless. The mind wants certainty first, but life rarely works that way. Clarity often arrives after movement, not before it. Confidence grows after action, not before it. Strength is built through resistance, not comfort. Right now, somewhere in your life, there is a choice you keep postponing. Maybe it is a conversation you know you need to have. Maybe it is a habit you know is weakening you. Maybe it is an environment you have outgrown. Maybe it is a version of yourself you keep abandoning every time things become uncomfortable. Deep down, you already know what it is. The problem is not awareness. The problem is willingness. Because seeing clearly means responsibility returns to your hands. Once you admit, I am choosing this, everything changes. You stop viewing life as something happening to you and start seeing the role your decisions play in shaping it. That realization can feel uncomfortable, but it is also powerful. Because if your choices helped create your current direction, then different choices can create a different future. Life responds to patterns more than intentions. It does not reward what you occasionally wish for. It rewards what you repeatedly choose. If you repeatedly choose comfort, life slowly removes your resilience. If you repeatedly choose distraction, life slowly removes your clarity. If you repeatedly choose avoidance, life slowly increases your anxiety. But if you repeatedly choose responsibility, life slowly gives you direction. If you repeatedly choose discipline, life slowly gives you confidence. If you repeatedly choose growth, life slowly expands your capacity. Cause and effect never stop working simply because the consequences are delayed. The results may arrive quietly, but they always arrive. Most people want transformation without interruption. They want a different future while protecting the same habits, the same mindset, the same comfort zones, and the same excuses. But transformation requires separation from the patterns that created your current life. And that separation always feels uncomfortable at first. The old version of you will fight to survive. The mind will search for excuses to stay familiar. That is why so many people stay stuck for years while convincing themselves they are trying. Thinking becomes a substitute for acting. Planning becomes a substitute for changing. Wanting becomes a substitute for choosing. But life only changes through decisions followed by repetition. You do not need to become perfect overnight. You do not need to fix your entire life today. You do not need some dramatic breakthrough moment before progress becomes possible. What you need is awareness. Awareness of the decisions you repeat daily. Awareness of the habits shaping your direction. Awareness of the excuses that protect your comfort while quietly damaging your future. Real growth begins the moment you stop pretending your choices are powerless. Because they are not powerless. They are building your future every single day. And this is the truth most people avoid until life forces them to face it. You are already becoming someone through your repeated behavior. The only question is whether you are becoming someone intentionally or accidentally. Every hour trains you. Every reaction shapes you. Every repeated action strengthens a pattern. Life is not waiting for some perfect version of you to arrive before it begins responding. It is responding right now to what you repeatedly tolerate, repeat, avoid, and choose. Whether you realize it or not, your life is moving in the direction of your decisions. And the moment you fully accept that, you stop waiting for change and start creating it. Chapter 2: Small choices create big lives. Nothing destroys a life all at once. It happens quietly. Slowly. Invisibly. A person does not wake up one morning completely lost, unhealthy, disconnected, distracted, exhausted, or unfulfilled. They arrive there gradually through small choices repeated long enough to become direction. That is what makes small decisions so dangerous. They never look important in the moment. One extra hour wasted. One excuse repeated. One promise ignored. One difficult task delayed. One distraction chosen over focus. None of these moments feel powerful enough to shape a future. But life is not shaped by intensity. It is shaped by accumulation. And accumulation is invisible while it is happening. That is why people underestimate it. They think dramatic moments change everything, but most lives are built in ordinary hours nobody remembers. The future is not created in one giant leap. It is built choice by choice, habit by habit, day after day, until eventually the pattern becomes identity. Every action you repeat becomes evidence for the kind of person you believe yourself to be. When you consistently avoid difficult things, your mind begins identifying with weakness. When you consistently follow through, even in small ways, your mind begins identifying with reliability. Confidence is not created through positive thinking. It is created through evidence. Discipline is not born from motivation. It is born from repetition. And repetition is built through small decisions most people ignore because they seem insignificant. But insignificant actions repeated long enough become powerful forces. A single unhealthy meal changes nothing. Years of careless eating change the body completely. Missing one workout changes nothing. Years of avoiding discomfort weakens both the body and the mind. One distracted day means little. Years of distraction destroy focus, patience, and direction. The effect always arrives later than the cause, which is why people disconnect their current life from the small choices that created it. Most people want immediate transformation because patience feels uncomfortable. They want dramatic motivation, instant clarity, and fast results. But life rarely changes through dramatic bursts of effort. It changes through consistency. And consistency is difficult because it feels repetitive, ordinary, and invisible at first. Nobody applauds the small disciplined actions repeated quietly every day. Nobody celebrates the person choosing focus instead of distraction when no one is watching. Nobody notices the tiny improvements happening in silence. But silence is where real change is built. The strongest people are not always the most talented or the most intelligent. They are often the people who learned how to continue when progress felt slow and invisible. Because they understood something most people ignore. Small choices compound. Compounding is one of the most powerful forces in human life. Every repeated action multiplies itself over time. Thoughts compound. Habits compound. Behaviors compound. Focus compounds. Distraction compounds. Courage compounds. Fear compounds. The problem is that compounding feels weak in the beginning. The first few disciplined choices seem meaningless. Reading a few pages changes nothing immediately. Saving a little money changes nothing immediately. Exercising for a week changes nothing immediately. Practicing a skill for a month may barely feel different. So people stop. They quit before compounding has time to reveal its power. They mistake slow progress for no progress. But life rewards those who continue beyond the stage where results are visible. Because eventually the small actions that once seemed insignificant become impossible to ignore. Two people can begin in almost identical situations and end up living completely different lives years later. The difference is rarely one massive decision. Usually, the difference is hidden inside ordinary routines. One person chooses learning while the other chooses distraction. One chooses discipline while the other chooses comfort. One chooses responsibility while the other chooses excuses. One chooses consistency while the other waits for motivation. Day by day, the gap feels tiny. But over years, the gap becomes enormous. That is how lives quietly separate. Not through destiny, but through repeated direction. People see success and assume it appeared suddenly, but they are only seeing the visible result of years of invisible choices. This is why your normal day matters more than your perfect day. Anyone can feel motivated occasionally. Anyone can act differently during emotional highs. But your future is built from your average behavior. The ordinary morning. The ordinary evening. The routine decisions made repeatedly without applause or recognition. How you respond when you are tired matters. How you respond when nobody is watching matters. How you respond when progress feels slow matters. Character is not built during rare dramatic moments. It is built in repeated private decisions. Every small action is teaching your mind something about who you are. Every repeated behavior strengthens either discipline or weakness. Nothing repeated stays neutral. The mind often searches for giant changes because giant changes feel emotionally satisfying. People love the fantasy of a completely new life beginning overnight. But massive change is difficult to sustain when the small daily systems remain the same. A person cannot create a focused life while maintaining distracted habits. They cannot create peace while feeding constant chaos. They cannot create strength while repeatedly avoiding resistance. The small behaviors always reveal the real direction. That is why habits matter more than intentions. Intentions are temporary emotions. Habits are repeated decisions. And repeated decisions create identity. Eventually, what once required effort becomes automatic. The disciplined person is not constantly forcing themselves to act. They have simply repeated certain choices so many times that those choices became natural. Many people spend years waiting for the perfect time to begin. They tell themselves they will change once life becomes easier, once motivation arrives, once stress disappears, once they feel ready. But readiness is often created through action, not before it. The person who waits for perfect conditions usually remains stuck because perfect conditions rarely come. Life keeps moving regardless of whether you feel prepared. Time keeps passing. Habits keep strengthening. Patterns keep repeating. The future keeps forming. And eventually people realize they spent years preparing mentally for a life they never actually started building. The truth is both terrifying and empowering. Your daily choices are shaping your future right now. What you tolerate shapes your standards. What you repeat shapes your identity. What you practice shapes your capabilities. Every small decision is either strengthening your future or weakening it. Every repeated action becomes a vote for the kind of life you are building. That means change does not require a dramatic breakthrough. It requires awareness and repetition. One better decision today may not transform your life instantly, but repeated consistently, it changes everything. This is why small choices deserve respect. They are not small once they are repeated. The life you experience years from now is hidden inside the ordinary decisions you make today. The way you spend your mornings. The way you manage your attention. The way you respond to discomfort. The way you speak to yourself. The way you handle responsibilities. The way you use your time when nobody controls you. These moments may feel forgettable, but they are building your future quietly in the background. Most people underestimate how much power exists inside consistency because consistency looks boring before it looks powerful. But boring actions repeated long enough create extraordinary outcomes. The strongest relationships are built through small moments of attention repeated over years. The strongest minds are built through repeated focus. The strongest bodies are built through repeated effort. The strongest lives are built through repeated alignment between values and actions. Life does not ask whether your choices are dramatic. It asks whether they are repeated. And one day, whether you realize it now or not, the life you are living will reveal the direction of the small choices you practice daily. Your habits are not preparing you for your future. They are creating it. Quietly. Consistently. Every single day. Chapter 3, Comfort is a daily decision. Comfort rarely looks dangerous in the beginning. That is why so many people spend years trapped inside it without realizing what it is costing them. Comfort feels harmless. It feels deserved. It feels like relief after stress, rest after pressure, silence after conflict, distraction after exhaustion. The mind naturally moves toward what feels easier because ease creates temporary emotional safety. But comfort becomes dangerous when it stops being recovery and starts becoming avoidance. Most people do not ruin their potential because they are incapable. They ruin it because they slowly train themselves to escape discomfort every chance they get. And the more often you escape discomfort, the weaker your ability to handle life becomes. The problem with comfort is not that it feels good. The problem is that it quietly teaches you to avoid growth. Growth almost never feels comfortable in the moment it is happening. Learning feels uncomfortable because it exposes ignorance. Discipline feels uncomfortable because it demands effort before reward. Honesty feels uncomfortable because it forces vulnerability. Change feels uncomfortable because it destroys familiarity. Responsibility feels uncomfortable because it removes excuses. Every meaningful transformation in life requires stepping into emotional resistance before results appear. But comfort teaches the opposite lesson. Comfort teaches the mind that resistance is a signal to stop instead of a signal that growth may be necessary. People often believe they are protecting themselves when they choose comfort repeatedly. In reality, they are reducing their capacity to face life. The body weakens when it avoids resistance. The mind weakens when it avoids challenge. Confidence weakens when promises are repeatedly broken. Focus weakens when distraction becomes constant. Comfort creates fragility because a life built entirely around ease cannot tolerate pressure. This is why so many people feel overwhelmed by ordinary responsibilities. They are not always carrying impossible burdens. Often, they have simply lost their tolerance for discomfort. Small challenges begin feeling unbearable because they have spent years training themselves to avoid struggle whenever possible. Comfort does not destroy people dramatically. It destroys them quietly. One delayed responsibility. One avoided conversation. One excuse repeated long enough to feel true. One more hour wasted escaping reality through distractions. One more promise postponed until tomorrow. None of these moments feel serious individually, but together they shape identity. A person who repeatedly chooses comfort slowly becomes someone who fears effort. They begin waiting for motivation before action. They begin needing perfect emotional conditions before progress feels possible. They become emotionally dependent on ease. And eventually even small acts of discipline start feeling exhausting because the mind has lost familiarity with resistance. This is why waiting to feel ready becomes such a dangerous habit. Readiness often never arrives before action. Most meaningful actions begin while feeling uncertain, uncomfortable, tired, or resistant. The disciplined person understands this and acts anyway. The undisciplined person keeps negotiating with discomfort until opportunities disappear. Life does not reward those who always feel motivated. It rewards those who continue despite temporary emotions. Because emotions change constantly. Some mornings you feel inspired. Other mornings you feel heavy, distracted, frustrated, or exhausted. If your progress depends entirely on your feelings, your direction will constantly collapse under pressure. Comfort always offers immediate rewards and delayed consequences. Discipline offers immediate resistance and delayed rewards. That is why comfort feels attractive in the short term. It asks very little from you right now. It allows you to postpone effort, avoid uncertainty, and protect yourself from temporary discomfort. But every avoided challenge grows heavier with time. Every delayed responsibility compounds into future stress. Every ignored habit strengthens itself through repetition. Comfort feels gentle in the present while quietly creating difficulty for the future. Discipline feels difficult in the present while quietly creating freedom later. The difference between strong lives and fragile lives is often hidden inside this pattern. People frequently misunderstand discipline because they imagine disciplined individuals enjoy discomfort. That is rarely true. Disciplined people feel resistance too. They feel tired too. They feel doubt too. The difference is not emotional experience. The difference is response. They no longer treat discomfort as an emergency that must be escaped immediately. They understand something most people refuse to accept: discomfort is temporary, but the consequences of avoiding it often last much longer. The discomfort, followed by long-term consequences. The other gives temporary resistance followed by long-term strength. Many people spend years trapped in cycles because they rely entirely on emotional momentum. They start strong when motivation is high, then disappear when motivation fades. They mistake emotional intensity for commitment. But emotional intensity is temporary. Commitment is revealed through repetition after emotions disappear. Anyone can begin. Very few continue. And life rewards continuation more than excitement. The person who moves forward consistently with ordinary effort often surpasses the person who relies on occasional bursts of inspiration. Because consistency compounds while inconsistency constantly resets progress back to the beginning. Discipline also requires accepting a difficult truth: you will not always feel like becoming the person you want to be. Some days your future will matter deeply to you. Other days comfort will feel more attractive than growth. On those days, your systems matter more than your emotions. Your routines matter more than your mood. Your standards matter more than your temporary desires. People who build powerful lives do not constantly negotiate with themselves. They reduce the space between decision and action. Once something matters enough, they stop reopening the conversation every day based on emotion. This is why discipline creates freedom instead of restriction. At first, discipline feels limiting because it removes impulsive behavior. But eventually it creates control. Financial discipline creates freedom from constant stress. Physical discipline creates energy and health. Mental discipline creates focus and peace. Emotional discipline creates stability under pressure. Without discipline, people become controlled by cravings, distractions, moods, and circumstances. They mistake impulsiveness for freedom while becoming increasingly trapped by their own lack of control. Real freedom comes from the ability to direct yourself even when feelings pull you elsewhere. The truth most people avoid is that your future is being shaped most heavily on the days you least feel like trying. Those are the moments where identity is formed. When nobody is watching. When motivation disappears. When progress feels invisible. When excuses feel convincing. Those moments decide whether you strengthen discipline or strengthen avoidance. Life keeps recording your repeated choices whether you acknowledge them or not. Discipline is not built in giant dramatic moments. It is built in small acts of follow-through repeated daily. Waking up when you said you would. Beginning when you do not feel ready. Finishing what you started. Staying consistent when results are slow. Protecting focus when distractions are available. Speaking honestly when silence feels easier. Returning after failure instead of quitting completely. These moments appear ordinary, but together they shape character. One day people will look at someone strong, focused, successful, calm, disciplined, and assume they were naturally different. But what they rarely see are the years of invisible choices behind that identity. The mornings they acted without motivation. The nights they continued despite exhaustion. The repetitions nobody applauded. The discomfort they stopped running from. Discipline always looks invisible while it is being built and obvious after it is built. And that is the truth most people spend years trying to avoid. You will rarely feel your way into a better life. You must behave your way into one first. Feelings follow action far more often than action follows feelings. The people who change their lives are not the people who wait until discipline feels natural. They are the people who choose discipline before it feels comfortable, and repeat that choice long enough for it to become who they are. Chapter 5: Your reactions shape your reality. Life is not shaped only by what happens to you. It is shaped by how you respond to what happens to you. Two people can face the same problem, the same disappointment, the same rejection, the same pressure, and walk away with completely different lives because reactions create direction. Most people spend years trying to control circumstances while ignoring the one thing that influences their future the most: their response. You cannot control every obstacle. You cannot control what people say, what opportunities disappear, what mistakes happen, or what pain arrives unexpectedly. But you can always control what happens next inside you. And that space between the event and your reaction quietly determines the quality of your life. Most reactions are automatic because most people live unconsciously. Someone disrespects them, and anger immediately takes over. Something becomes difficult, and avoidance appears instantly. Stress arrives, and distraction becomes the escape. Fear appears, and procrastination follows. The reaction happens so quickly that people rarely stop long enough to question it. They simply assume their emotions are truth and act accordingly. But emotions are not instructions. Emotions are signals. And a signal does not have to control your direction unless you allow it to. The strongest people are not emotionless. They simply learned how to pause long enough to choose their response instead of becoming controlled by their first impulse. A single reaction may seem small, but repeated reactions become personality. A person who repeatedly reacts with blame eventually loses responsibility. A person who repeatedly reacts with avoidance eventually loses confidence. A person who repeatedly reacts with anger eventually loses peace. Every repeated emotional pattern trains the nervous system to respond the same way again. This is why many people feel trapped inside the same cycles for years. They believe life keeps happening to them, but often they are repeating the same unconscious reactions to life over and over again. Different circumstances. Same emotional pattern. Same outcome. Pressure does not create character. Pressure reveals the patterns already inside you. When stress appears, people do not suddenly become someone new. They fall back on whatever reactions they have practiced most often. The person who practiced patience responds differently under pressure than the person who practiced panic. The person who practiced responsibility reacts differently than the person who practiced excuses. This is why your small daily reactions matter more than you think. Every moment of frustration, delay, criticism, boredom, fear, or discomfort becomes training. You are either strengthening calm or strengthening chaos. Either strengthening focus or strengthening impulsiveness. Either strengthening maturity or strengthening emotional weakness. Most people overestimate the power of circumstances and underestimate the power of mindset. They believe peace comes from perfect situations, but peace is often created through emotional discipline. A person who cannot control their reactions in small situations will struggle to handle larger ones. If a minor inconvenience destroys your focus, bigger pressures will overwhelm you completely. If every emotional trigger controls your behavior, your life will constantly feel unstable because your emotions constantly change. Emotional control is not suppression. It is awareness. It is learning how to feel emotions without immediately obeying them. This becomes especially important during difficult seasons of life. Pain has a way of narrowing perception. When people are hurt, rejected, stressed, embarrassed, or disappointed, they often react impulsively because they want immediate emotional relief. They lash out. They isolate themselves. They quit too quickly. They numb themselves with distractions. They make permanent decisions based on temporary feelings. But temporary emotions create permanent consequences when reactions are unconscious. One emotional moment can damage years of trust. One impulsive reaction can destroy opportunities. One uncontrolled habit under stress can slowly reshape identity. The mind always wants immediate comfort. When something painful happens, the brain searches for the fastest escape possible. That is why reacting emotionally often feels satisfying in the short term. Anger feels powerful temporarily. Avoidance feels relieving temporarily. Complaining feels validating temporarily. But temporary relief is not the same as long-term growth. Reactions that feel emotionally satisfying now often create suffering later. The strongest reactions are usually the quietest ones. The pause before speaking. The decision not to escalate. The willingness to think clearly before responding emotionally. That restraint may look small from the outside, but it changes futures. People often believe maturity comes with age. It does not. Many people grow older without ever learning how to manage their reactions. True maturity comes when a person stops blaming emotions for behavior and starts taking responsibility for response. Feeling anger does not force cruelty. Feeling fear does not force avoidance. Feeling insecurity does not force dishonesty. Emotional reactions may appear automatically, but behavior still involves choice. The moment you understand that, you regain power. Because if reactions can be observed, they can also be redirected. This is why awareness becomes one of the most valuable skills in life. Most people never slow down enough to notice what repeatedly triggers them. They simply react automatically and call it personality. But patterns reveal deeper truths. If criticism instantly creates defensiveness, there is insecurity underneath. If silence creates panic, there may be fear of abandonment underneath. If boredom constantly leads to distraction, there may be discomfort with stillness underneath. Reactions expose what still controls you internally. And until you become aware of those patterns, they continue shaping your life from the background. Your reactions also influence the people around you more than you realize. Energy spreads. Emotional patterns spread. A person who reacts with calm during difficulty creates stability for others. A person who reacts with panic creates tension everywhere they go. Leadership is often less about intelligence and more about emotional control under pressure. People trust those who can remain grounded when situations become difficult. They feel safe around people who respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively. Your reaction becomes part of the emotional environment you create for yourself and everyone connected to you. One of the hardest truths to accept is that life will continue testing your emotional patterns until you learn from them. The same frustrations appear in different forms. The same insecurities return through different situations. The same fears keep resurfacing until awareness interrupts the cycle. Many people think they need a completely different life when what they actually need is a different response. Because changing your reaction changes your experience of life itself. This does not mean you will never feel anger, fear, sadness, stress, or frustration again. Emotional pain is part of being human. The goal is not emotional perfection. The goal is emotional responsibility. It is learning how to pause long enough to decide who you want to be before emotion chooses for you. That pause may only last a few seconds, but inside those seconds exists the power to completely change direction. Your future will not only be shaped by your goals, your plans, or your intentions. It will also be shaped by your repeated reactions during ordinary moments of stress, disappointment, pressure, and uncertainty. The way you respond when life becomes difficult reveals the person you are becoming. Every reaction strengthens something. Every emotional choice trains the mind. Every repeated response builds identity. And eventually, the quality of your life becomes deeply connected to the quality of your reactions. Because circumstances may arrive without permission, but the meaning they carry in your life is shaped by how you choose to respond. Chapter 6. Consistency is built in silence. Most people are fascinated by results but deeply uncomfortable with repetition. They admire strength, confidence, success, discipline, focus, and achievement, but they rarely appreciate the quiet process required to build those things. What they usually see is the visible outcome. The body that looks strong. The business that became successful. The calm person who handles pressure well. The creator who built influence. The student who became exceptional. The relationship that stayed healthy for years. What they do not see are the thousands of silent repetitions behind those results. The mornings nobody witnessed. The routines nobody applauded. The lonely hours where progress looked invisible. Consistency is built in those moments. Not in excitement. Not in attention. In silence. The mind naturally craves visible progress because visible progress creates emotional reward. People want proof that their effort matters immediately. They want results fast enough to keep motivation alive. But most meaningful growth happens slowly and invisibly at first. A person can stay disciplined for weeks and see almost nothing change externally. They can practice a skill repeatedly and still feel average. They can work hard consistently while life appears unchanged. This is the stage where most people quit. Not because they are incapable, but because silence feels discouraging. The brain starts questioning whether the effort is worth it. Doubt begins growing because there is no immediate reward confirming progress. This is where consistency separates itself from motivation. Motivation depends on emotional excitement. Consistency depends on commitment. Motivation wants quick evidence. Consistency understands that results are delayed. The person who changes their life is rarely the person who feels inspired every day. It is the person who continues after inspiration disappears. Because real growth often looks boring before it looks impressive. Repetition is not exciting. Discipline is not glamorous. Progress is often invisible while it is happening. But invisible progress is still progress. Most people destroy momentum because they keep chasing intensity instead of sustainability. They try to change everything overnight. They create unrealistic routines based on temporary emotional highs. They push themselves aggressively for a few days or weeks, then collapse once the excitement fades. The problem is not effort. The problem is inconsistency. Life rarely changes through extreme actions performed occasionally. It changes through manageable actions repeated continuously. A small habit repeated daily becomes more powerful than a massive effort repeated rarely. Consistency compounds quietly while intensity burns itself out. Silence becomes difficult because silence forces you to confront yourself without applause. Many people are motivated by recognition more than growth itself. They feel energized when others notice their effort, support their goals, or validate their progress. But eventually every meaningful journey reaches a stage where external validation disappears. Nobody notices the discipline anymore. Nobody congratulates the repetition anymore. Nobody sees the sacrifices happening privately. At that point, a deeper question appears. Will you continue even when nobody is watching? That question reveals true commitment. Because anyone can perform temporarily when attention is present. Consistency is revealed when effort continues in private. The workout nobody posts online. The studying nobody celebrates. The habit nobody compliments. The emotional control nobody notices. The promises kept quietly without external reward. These invisible actions shape identity more than public moments ever will. Character grows strongest in places where recognition is absent. There is also a psychological battle inside consistency that many people fail to understand. Repetition often creates emotional resistance because the brain constantly seeks novelty. Human beings are naturally drawn toward stimulation, entertainment, and instant reward. This is why distraction becomes so powerful. Phones, scrolling, entertainment, noise, endless information, constant stimulation. The modern world trains the mind to crave quick emotional changes. But consistency requires the opposite. It requires staying focused long enough for delayed results to appear. It requires repeating simple actions after the excitement disappears. It requires patience in a world addicted to immediacy. Most people are not destroyed by one catastrophic mistake. They are slowly weakened by inconsistency. They start and stop repeatedly until they no longer trust themselves. Every abandoned routine becomes evidence in the mind that follow-through is temporary. Every broken promise weakens self-respect slightly. Eventually people stop believing their own commitments because their behavior has trained them not to trust themselves. This is why consistency builds confidence at such a deep level. Not because it creates perfection, but because it creates reliability. When you repeatedly prove to yourself that you can continue even without emotion supporting you, your relationship with yourself changes. Consistency also teaches patience, and patience is one of the rarest forms of strength in modern life. People want outcomes faster than reality naturally allows. They become frustrated when results take time. But meaningful transformation always grows slower than people expect. Trust takes time. Mastery takes time. Physical change takes time. Mental strength takes time. Emotional healing takes time. Deep growth develops beneath the surface long before it becomes visible externally. The strongest roots in nature grow underground first. Human growth follows the same principle. This is why comparison becomes so dangerous during silent seasons of progress. While you are building quietly, other people may appear ahead of you. Their success may look faster. Their progress may look easier. Their lives may seem more exciting. And if you constantly compare your invisible process to someone else's visible outcome, frustration will eventually destroy your focus. What people rarely see are the years of repetition hidden behind visible success. Everyone wants the outcome. Few people want the routine that creates it. Consistency is also deeply connected to identity. Every repeated action becomes evidence of who you believe yourself to be. When you continue despite boredom, despite slow progress, despite lack of recognition, you begin building a new internal identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who only acts emotionally. You become someone reliable. Someone stable. Someone capable of staying aligned with their values even when emotions fluctuate. That identity eventually becomes more powerful than temporary motivation ever could be. There will be days when consistency feels pointless. Days when progress appears invisible. Days when effort feels repetitive and unrewarded. Days when distractions seem easier and comfort feels more attractive than discipline. Those are the days that matter most. Because consistency is not built when things feel easy. It is built when continuing feels emotionally inconvenient but you continue anyway. Those quiet moments shape futures more than dramatic breakthroughs ever will. One of the most dangerous habits people develop is constantly restarting. Restarting diets. Restarting goals. Restarting routines. Restarting focus. Starting over repeatedly creates the illusion of effort without the power of accumulation. Real transformation requires remaining long enough for compounding to occur. The person who continues imperfectly often grows faster than the person who keeps stopping to chase perfect motivation. Consistency does not require perfection. It requires return. Return after failure. Return after distraction. Return after difficult days. Return after emotional setbacks. The ability to return repeatedly matters more than never struggling at all. Life eventually rewards consistent direction. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Quietly. The results appear slowly at first, then suddenly people wonder how everything changed. But the truth is nothing changed suddenly. The visible outcome was simply the delayed result of invisible repetition. Every focused day mattered. Every disciplined decision mattered. Every small promise kept mattered. Every silent moment of continuation mattered. Most people never reach their potential because they underestimate the power of ordinary actions repeated consistently. They keep searching for something dramatic while ignoring the simple behaviors capable of transforming their lives over time. But the future is not built in dramatic moments alone. It is built quietly in daily repetition. In silence. In private. In moments nobody applauds. And one day, the life you once wanted will begin appearing around you, not because of one powerful moment, but because you learned how to continue long after excitement disappeared. Chapter 7: Choosing Yourself Every Day. One of the hardest things a person will ever learn is how to choose themselves without guilt. Most people spend their lives searching for acceptance, approval, validation, and belonging from the outside world. They learn early to shape themselves around expectations. Be easier to handle. Be less emotional. Be more useful. Be more impressive. Be more agreeable. Slowly, without realizing it, they begin building a life around being accepted rather than being aligned. And after enough years of abandoning themselves to maintain comfort, peace, relationships, or approval, they wake up feeling disconnected from who they really are. Not because they lost themselves suddenly, but because they stopped choosing themselves consistently. Choosing yourself does not mean becoming selfish or careless toward others. It means refusing to betray your own well-being, values, boundaries, growth, and truth just to avoid discomfort. It means recognizing that constantly abandoning yourself to keep other people comfortable eventually destroys your sense of identity. Many people become experts at understanding everyone else while remaining strangers to themselves. They know what others need. They know what others expect. They know how to avoid conflict, disappointment, or rejection. But they no longer know what they truly want because they have spent so much time prioritizing external approval over internal honesty. This often begins subtly. A person says yes when they want to say no. They tolerate disrespect. Chapter 8: The life you repeat becomes the life you live. Most people think their future is something distant. Something waiting ahead of them. Something that will eventually arrive through luck, opportunity, timing, or a sudden breakthrough moment. But the future is not waiting somewhere far away. The future is being practiced right now through your repeated behavior. The life you repeat becomes the life you live. Not occasionally. Not someday. Daily. Quietly. Consistently. Every routine, every habit, every emotional pattern, every repeated thought is shaping the direction of your life whether you notice it or not. People often separate their daily actions from their long-term future because the consequences of behavior are delayed. A person can waste time for months and still appear fine. They can ignore their health for years before serious consequences appear. They can avoid difficult conversations while relationships slowly weaken in silence. They can choose distraction every day while still convincing themselves they are capable of focus whenever necessary. The delay between action and consequence creates the illusion that small choices do not matter. But life keeps recording repetition long before visible results appear. The future is always forming beneath the surface. This is why patterns matter more than intentions. Anyone can have good intentions. Anyone can dream about becoming disciplined, successful, healthy, calm, focused, confident, or fulfilled. But intentions do not shape identity unless behavior repeatedly supports them. Your repeated actions reveal your real priorities far more honestly than your words ever will. If you repeatedly choose distraction, you are practicing distraction. If you repeatedly choose avoidance, you are practicing avoidance. If you repeatedly choose growth, you are practicing growth. Every repeated behavior becomes training. And eventually training becomes identity. The human mind adapts to whatever it repeats most often. This is both dangerous and powerful. A person who constantly reacts emotionally trains emotional impulsiveness. A person who constantly seeks comfort lowers their tolerance for discomfort. A person who repeatedly breaks promises to themselves weakens self-trust. But the opposite is also true. A person who consistently follows through strengthens discipline. A person who repeatedly faces discomfort builds resilience. A person who practices focus develops clarity. The mind does not care whether your habits help or hurt you. It simply strengthens whatever you repeat. Most people underestimate how much their environment shapes repetition. The people around you influence what becomes normal. The content you consume influences what occupies your thoughts. The routines surrounding your life influence what behaviors become automatic. This is why change often feels difficult even when someone genuinely wants a different future. They are trying to create a new life while remaining loyal to old patterns, old environments, and old habits. But repeated environments create repeated behaviors. Eventually the mind stops questioning what it experiences daily and begins accepting it as identity. This is why awareness is so important. Before life changes externally, patterns must become visible internally. Most people live on autopilot. They wake up the same way, think the same thoughts, react the same way, consume the same distractions, avoid the same discomforts, and repeat the same routines until years disappear. Then they wonder why life feels stagnant. But stagnation is rarely created by one dramatic failure. It is created by unconscious repetition. You cannot create a different future while practicing the same behaviors daily. Change requires interruption. It requires awareness strong enough to break automatic cycles. One of the hardest truths to accept is that your habits are always preparing you for something. Your daily routines are either preparing you for strength or preparing you for weakness. Your attention is either becoming sharper or more scattered. Your reactions are either becoming calmer or more impulsive. Your mind is either becoming more disciplined or more distracted. Nothing repeated stays neutral. The life you practice eventually becomes the life you experience. People often search for major external solutions because external change feels exciting. A new opportunity. A new city. A new relationship. A new beginning. But many people carry the same internal patterns into every new environment. They keep repeating the same emotional reactions, the same avoidance, the same distractions, the same habits, and then wonder why the outcomes feel familiar. Wherever you go, your repeated behavior follows you. This is why real transformation begins internally before it becomes visible externally. A different life requires a different pattern. There is also a quiet danger in believing you have unlimited time to change direction. People assume they can. Chapter 9, Your future is hidden in your daily routine. Most people imagine the future as something unpredictable, distant, and impossible to fully understand. They worry about where life is heading while ignoring the clearest evidence already in front of them, their daily routine. Your future is rarely hidden inside one dramatic moment. It is hidden inside your ordinary days. The way you wake up. The way you think. The way you manage your attention. The way you handle pressure. The way you spend your free time. The way you respond to discomfort when nobody is forcing you to act. These patterns may seem insignificant because they feel familiar, but familiarity is exactly what makes them powerful. What you repeat daily eventually becomes what shapes your entire life. A routine is more than a schedule. It is a reflection of priorities practiced consistently. Most people say they care deeply about growth, peace, health, discipline, purpose, relationships, or success, but their routines often reveal something completely different. Their attention is constantly distracted. Their energy is consumed by things that add no value. Their habits move them away from the life they claim they want. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Your actions reveal your direction more honestly than your intentions ever will. The future responds to repeated behavior, not temporary desire. The reason routines matter so deeply is because routines remove the need for constant decision-making. Whatever becomes routine slowly becomes automatic. And automatic behavior is powerful because it shapes life without requiring emotional effort every single day. A person who builds routines around distraction eventually becomes distracted automatically. A person who builds routines around discipline eventually becomes disciplined automatically. The brain adapts to whatever it repeats most often. Over time, routines stop feeling like choices and begin feeling like identity. This is why the beginning and end of your day matter more than most people realize. The first hour of your morning often determines the direction of your focus, energy, and mindset for the rest of the day. If the day begins with chaos, distraction, noise, comparison, stress, and impulsive behavior, the mind becomes reactive before the day even truly starts. But when mornings begin with clarity, movement, focus, reflection, or intentional action, the mind strengthens differently. The same is true at night. The final habits before sleep influence emotional state, mental clarity, discipline, and recovery. Small repeated routines create psychological momentum, and momentum shapes identity quietly over time. Most people underestimate how much their attention controls their future. Attention is life energy directed toward something repeatedly. Whatever consistently receives your attention begins shaping your thoughts, emotions, habits, and identity. If your routine constantly feeds distraction, negativity, noise, comparison, or emotional overstimulation, your inner world becomes scattered. Focus becomes harder. Patience weakens. Clarity disappears. But if your attention is directed intentionally toward learning, growth, discipline, meaningful work, health, reflection, and purpose, the mind slowly reorganizes itself around those priorities. This is why modern life makes intentional living so difficult. Distraction is everywhere. Endless scrolling. Constant notifications. Infinite entertainment. Continuous stimulation competing for attention every second. The world profits from keeping people reactive, emotionally triggered, distracted, and mentally exhausted. A distracted person struggles to build anything meaningful because deep work, deep relationships, emotional stability, and real growth all require sustained attention. Every time your routine trains your mind to seek instant stimulation, your ability to tolerate focus weakens slightly. And eventually many people become unable to sit quietly with their own thoughts without needing escape. Your daily routine also reveals your relationship with discomfort. People often imagine discipline as something dramatic, but discipline usually appears through simple repeated behaviors. Waking up when you said you would. Beginning important work before distractions take over. Moving your body consistently. Managing your time intentionally. Protecting your focus. Saying no to impulses that weaken your future. These actions may appear ordinary, but ordinary actions repeated daily create extraordinary differences over time. Life does not usually change through rare intense moments. It changes through repeated routines that either strengthen or weaken you quietly. One of the most dangerous habits people develop is living reactively instead of intentionally. They wake up and immediately surrender their attention to the outside world. Their emotions become controlled by notifications, problems, stress, other people's opinions, or endless digital stimulation. The day controls them instead of them controlling the day. Reactive living creates emotional exhaustion because the mind never fully settles into clarity or purpose. Intentional living is different. It requires deciding what deserves your energy before the world decides for you. It requires protecting your attention like something valuable because it is valuable. Many people say they want change while protecting the exact routines creating their current life. They want confidence without building routines around consistency. They want peace without creating routines around reflection or emotional control. They want success without routines that support focus and growth. But goals unsupported by routine eventually collapse under emotion. Motivation fades quickly. Routines remain. This is why systems matter more than temporary inspiration. A strong routine protects direction even on difficult days when feelings fluctuate. The beautiful thing about routines is that small adjustments can eventually create massive transformation. 1 hour used differently every day changes knowledge, skill, health, focus, confidence, and opportunity over time. One healthier habit repeated daily changes the body gradually. One calmer response repeated changes emotional stability gradually. Most people fail because they seek dramatic change while ignoring the quiet power of daily structure. But life is shaped more by what you consistently do than by what you occasionally attempt. Your environment also plays a major role in shaping routine. The people around you influence what feels normal. The spaces you spend time in influence your energy and focus. The content you consume influences your thinking. Human beings adapt constantly to repeated surroundings. This means protecting your environment is part of protecting your future. If your environment constantly encourages distraction, negativity, laziness, chaos, or emotional instability, your routines will eventually reflect those influences. But when your environment supports clarity, discipline, growth, and focus, consistent action becomes easier to sustain. There will always be days when routines feel boring, repetitive, or emotionally difficult to maintain. That is normal. Routine is not supposed to create constant excitement. Its purpose is to create stability strong enough to continue even when emotions fluctuate. Excitement comes and goes. Structure remains. The strongest people are not always the most motivated. Often they are simply the people who built routines capable of carrying them through low-energy days, stressful seasons, and emotional uncertainty. Over time, your daily routine becomes your life in physical form. Your habits become your health. Your attention becomes your mindset. Your routines become your identity. Every ordinary day becomes part of the future you are constructing quietly in the background. That is why small daily choices deserve respect. They may look harmless individually, but repeated long enough they shape everything. And one day, the life you experience will no longer feel random. It will feel familiar because you practiced it daily long before the results became visible. Your future is not hiding somewhere far away waiting to surprise you. In many ways, it is already visible inside the routines you repeat every single day. Chapter 10: The direction you choose becomes your destiny. At some point, every person reaches a moment where they realize life is not waiting for them anymore. Time keeps moving whether they act or not. Days continue passing whether they grow or remain the same. Opportunities appear and disappear. Energy changes. Seasons change. People change. And eventually the uncomfortable truth becomes impossible to ignore: life does not become meaningful automatically. Direction must be chosen intentionally. Because whether you realize it or not, every repeated decision is pulling your future somewhere. The question is not whether your life has direction. The question is whether you are choosing that direction consciously or drifting toward it unconsciously. Most people spend years believing they still have unlimited time to become the person they keep imagining. They postpone growth because tomorrow feels guaranteed. They delay difficult changes because the consequences seem far away. They assume there will always be another chance to focus, another opportunity to begin, another season to become disciplined, another moment to repair what has been neglected. But life rarely announces when repetition becomes destiny. It happens quietly. One routine becomes a year. One year becomes a decade. And eventually people realize they did not intentionally build their lives. They slowly drifted into them through repeated unconscious choices. Drifting is dangerous because it feels harmless in the beginning. There is no dramatic warning sign when a person slowly disconnects from their potential. It happens through small compromises repeated long enough to become identity. A person lowers their standards slightly. They avoid one difficult responsibility. They choose distraction instead of focus. Comfort instead of discipline. Silence instead of honesty. Delay instead of action. Individually these choices appear insignificant, but repeated over time they create an entirely different life. Destiny is rarely created through one giant moment. It is built through repeated direction. This is why awareness changes everything. The moment a person becomes fully honest about the direction of their current habits, reactions, routines, and mindset, they regain power. Because direction can change before destiny fully forms. Most people wait until pain becomes unbearable before they finally confront their patterns. They wait until relationships collapse, health declines, opportunities disappear, confidence disappears, or emotional exhaustion becomes overwhelming. But wisdom means recognizing direction early. It means understanding that today's small behaviors become tomorrow's reality if repeated long enough. One of the greatest lies people believe is that they need perfect clarity before taking action. They think purpose arrives fully formed before movement begins. But purpose often reveals itself through movement, not before it. Direction becomes clearer while walking, not while endlessly waiting. Many people remain stuck because they keep demanding certainty from life before committing effort. But certainty rarely exists at the beginning. Growth requires trust. Trust that small consistent choices matter even before visible results appear. Trust that discipline builds strength even when progress feels slow. Trust that becoming intentional today changes where life eventually leads. Your direction is not shaped only by major goals. It is shaped by what you repeatedly tolerate. What you allow into your mind. What you excuse. What you avoid. What you practice emotionally. What you consume mentally. What you repeat physically. The future grows out of these patterns quietly every single day. This is why protecting your standards matters so deeply. Standards determine what behaviors become acceptable. And what becomes acceptable eventually becomes normal. A person who repeatedly tolerates chaos eventually lives in chaos. A person who repeatedly tolerates disrespect eventually loses self-worth. A person who repeatedly tolerates distraction eventually loses clarity. Standards quietly shape destiny. There is also a difficult truth many people spend years avoiding: no one is coming to rescue your future for you. At some point, responsibility becomes unavoidable. Other people can support you, encourage you, guide you, love you, and help you, but nobody can repeatedly choose your direction on your behalf. Nobody can build your discipline for you. Nobody can protect your focus for you. Nobody can consistently make the difficult decisions required to shape your future. Eventually, every person must decide whether they are willing to take ownership of their own life or continue surrendering that responsibility to circumstances, emotions, and excuses. Taking responsibility is uncomfortable because it removes emotional hiding places. Once you accept that your repeated choices shape your future, blaming life becomes harder. Excuses lose power. Complaining loses usefulness. Victimhood becomes less attractive because responsibility returns control back into your hands. This does not mean life is always fair. Pain exists. Setbacks exist. Unfairness exists. Some people begin life carrying burdens others never experience. But regardless of circumstances, direction still matters. The strongest people are not always the people with the easiest lives. Often they are the people who refuse to let pain decide their direction permanently. There will always be moments where giving up feels easier than continuing. Moments where old habits pull harder than new disciplines. Moments where comfort whispers louder than growth. Moments where fear tries convincing you to stay familiar. Those moments never fully disappear. But each time you choose growth over comfort, clarity over distraction, responsibility over excuses, discipline over emotion, you strengthen the person you are becoming. Identity is built through repeated decisions during uncomfortable moments. Destiny grows from those decisions quietly over time. People often search for life-changing moments while ignoring life-changing patterns. But patterns are what create transformation. Waking up intentionally. Managing attention carefully. Following through consistently. Responding calmly under pressure. Choosing honesty when lying feels easier. Continuing after failure instead of quitting. Returning after setbacks. Protecting your standards daily. These actions may appear ordinary, but repeated long enough they completely reshape identity and direction. The beautiful part of life is that direction can change at any moment. Awareness becomes stronger than autopilot. A person can spend years distracted and still begin rebuilding focus. A person can spend years avoiding discomfort and still begin building discipline. A person can spend years disconnected from themselves and still begin choosing growth intentionally. The past influences you, but it does not have to imprison you. The same repetition that built old patterns can build new ones. Human beings remain capable of change as long as they are willing to choose differently consistently. In the end, life reflects repeated direction more honestly than temporary intention. Your future will not be decided by what you occasionally wish for during emotional moments. It will be decided by what you repeatedly choose when ordinary life continues quietly around you. Every reaction matters. Every habit matters. Every routine matters. Every small decision carries direction inside it. And one day, years from now, you will stand inside a life created largely by the choices you repeated daily when nobody else was paying attention. The direction you practiced became the destiny you lived. Because life was never built in one giant moment alone. It was built choice by choice, day after day, until the future finally became visible.